Single mum brings twins to the interview. The millionaire CEO is shocked to find they look just like him. Hi, my beautiful and loyal family. Welcome back to your safe and loving home, Mr. Peter's family. May the Almighty lift every woman above the shadows of doubt, wrap her in courage that never falters, and place peace in her heart that no storm can shake. May your tears be transformed into rivers of strength, your struggles blossom into triumphs, and your quiet prayers rise as miracles waiting to meet you. You are the light that softens the darkest nights, the warmth that steadies every heart around you, and the love that never asks for recognition, yet changes everything. May your days be gentle, your spirit unbreakable, and your soul bathed in endless hope. My precious family, never underestimate the power of your presence. Your love keeps this home alive. A like is a blessing. A comment is a prayer shared. If your heart carries love, like this video. If your spirit walks in faith, comment, "I'm with Mr. Peter." Catherine Jolie had learned long ago that survival meant showing up even when the world wanted you invisible, but nothing prepared her for the moment Sean Williams looked up from his desk and saw the twins standing beside her chair. The Williams Tech Corporation tower pierced the Manhattan skyline like a declaration of power. Catherine had walked past it 1,000 times while working her cafe shift in the lobby, always knowing it represented a world she'd never touch. Today, she was walking into an executive interview on the 47th floor, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Mama, why are we here?" Bet whispered, gripping her hand tighter. "Because Mama has an important meeting." Catherine smoothed her daughter's hair, then adjusted Audrey's collar. The babysitter had cancelled last minute. She'd dressed them in their best clothes, praying they'd sit quietly while she fought for this position. The reception area was all glass and steel, cold and intimidating. Other candidates sat in expensive suits, scrolling through phones that cost more than Catherine's monthly rent. She straightened her spine. She belonged here. She'd earned the right to be here. "Catherine Jolie?" A woman in a sharp blazer appeared. "Mr. Williams will see you now." Her heart hammered. She'd expected a panel interview, not the CEO himself. The twins stood with her, Audrey on her left, Bet on her right, both looking up at her with complete trust. "I apologize. Childcare emergency. They'll be very quiet." The woman's expression flickered with something unreadable. "Follow me." The office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, space that swallowed sound. Behind the massive desk sat Sean Williams. Catherine had seen his picture in business magazines. Younger than most CEOs, sharp-featured, with the kind of presence that commanded rooms without effort. He was reading something, hadn't looked up yet. The woman announced Catherine and left. "Ms. Jolie, thank you for—" Sean glanced up. His entire body went rigid. He wasn't looking at Catherine. He was staring at Audrey and Bet like he'd seen ghosts. The color drained from his face. His hand, reaching for a pen, froze mid-air. Catherine felt ice down her spine. "Mr. Williams?" He blinked, dragging his eyes to Catherine. His jaw worked like he was trying to remember how to speak. "Please, sit down." She sat, positioning the girls on either side. They were being perfect, quiet, still, sensing the strange tension crackling through the room. Sean's gaze kept drifting back to them, particularly to their faces, with an intensity that made Catherine's protective instincts flare. "Your resume." His voice sounded hollow. "Multiple positions, worked your way up from—" He stopped. "You're originally from Ashford Ridge?" Catherine's spine straightened. She never mentioned her hometown. "Yes. I moved to New York some time ago. Mountain area, small town." His knuckles were white against the desk edge. "What brought you here?" This wasn't a standard interview question. Catherine kept her voice measured. "Opportunity, better prospects for my family. And you've been working in our building's cafe." He was still staring at the girls, at Bet, who had his exact smile. "Yes, I've learned the corporate environment from the ground level. I understand this position involves community outreach. How old are your daughters?" The question cut through her prepared pitch. Catherine's hands clenched in her lap. "Mr. Williams, I don't see how that's relevant." "It's not." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly shaken. "I apologize. That was inappropriate." He forced his attention back to the papers, but his hand trembled slightly. "Tell me about your approach to community engagement." The interview lurched forward in fits and starts. Sean asked questions but couldn't maintain focus, his attention constantly pulled back to Audrey and Bet. Catherine answered with hard-won competence, talking about grassroots programs and stakeholder engagement, but part of her mind raced. Why was he looking at her daughters like that? What did he see? "You're clearly qualified." Sean stood abruptly. "We'll be in touch by tomorrow." Tomorrow. Most positions took weeks. "Yes." He came around the desk and crouched down suddenly, bringing himself to eye level with Audrey and Bet. "You two were very patient. What are your names?" "I'm Audrey," her daughter said softly, "and this is Bet. We're twins." "I can see that." His voice cracked. "You're both very beautiful." "Everyone says we look like our daddy," Bet said, "but we don't have a daddy." The words hung in the air. Sean's face transformed into something raw and broken. He stood quickly, turning away. Catherine saw his shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath before he faced them again, expression carefully controlled. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Jolie." Catherine took her daughter's hands and left, feeling his stare burning into her back. In the lobby, she finally exhaled. Something had just happened up there, something she didn't understand, and it terrified her. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Catherine stood at her apartment window looking out at the glittering city. She'd fought so hard to get here, to build something from nothing. Tomorrow, Williams Tech would call. She knew they would, though she couldn't say why. 47 floors above her, Sean Williams sat in his darkened office, staring at his phone. His head of security's number glowed on the screen. Finally, he made the call. "Find out everything about Catherine Jolie. Everything. Start with Ashford Ridge. I need it by morning." He hung up and closed his eyes, seeing those two little faces again. Those eyes. That smile. His eyes. His smile. The dates would match. He knew they would match, and the knowledge was tearing him apart because he couldn't remember her face. He'd been there, in Ashford Ridge, and he couldn't remember the woman whose life he'd clearly destroyed. Chapter 2. The Night the Rain Fell. 7 years ago, Sean Williams had gone to Ashford Ridge to forget his father's funeral, and he'd succeeded so completely that he couldn't remember the woman who'd held him while he shattered. The mountain resort was supposed to be about business, a corporate retreat, networking and strategy in carefully curated rustic elegance. Sean had been newly promoted, rising fast in his father's company, playing the brilliant son who had everything figured out. Then his father died. Heart attack, sudden, brutal. One moment giving a presentation, the next moment gone. The funeral was enormous, full of people who'd never actually known the man. Sean stood in his black suit, shaking hands, accepting condolences, feeling nothing but vast emptiness where grief should have been. He'd had a complicated relationship with his father. Respect without warmth, admiration without love. And now there would never be a chance to make it anything else. He'd gone to Ashford Ridge anyway, because stopping would mean feeling it. The resort was beautiful in that carefully maintained way, all rustic elegance and mountain views. He sat through sessions, contributed meaningfully, did everything expected while something inside him cracked wider with each passing hour. The third night, he went to the resort bar and started drinking, heavily, whiskey, trying to drown the howling grief he couldn't acknowledge. Around midnight, stumbling, he left and walked into the rain. It started as drizzle but quickly became a downpour. He walked without direction, needing to move, to feel something other than the terrible emptiness. Lightning split the sky, and he found himself under an overhang, breathing hard, rain streaming down his face, mixing with tears he finally couldn't hold back. "Are you okay?" He turned. A young woman pressed against the wall, also soaked, watching him with concern. She was beautiful, in an uncommon way, with skin like deep earth and eyes that held their own storms. She wore a resort staff uniform, soaked through like his shirt. No. The alcohol and grief stripped away his usual control. I'm really not. She stepped closer. Me neither. They talked. Or rather, he talked. Words pouring out about his father, the funeral, feeling like he'd lost something he'd never actually had. She listened without offering empty platitudes, just being present in his pain. Eventually she shared too. Complicated family, feeling trapped in a small town with small minds, dreams that seemed impossible from where she stood. He never asked her name, she never asked his. They were just two people drowning in different sorrows, finding momentary shelter in each other. The rain intensified. She shivered, and he pulled her closer without thinking. The touch sparked something electric. When he kissed her, she kissed back with matching desperation. They stumbled to his cabin, hands fumbling with wet clothes, mouths never separating. The sex was raw, passionate, almost violent in its intensity. Not gentle or romantic, but necessary. Two people trying to feel something other than pain. Rain pounded the roof while they tangled together, and for those hours, Sean felt present in his body in a way he never had before. Afterward, they lay in the dark, her head on his chest, both quiet. He stroked her hair, breathing in rain and something uniquely her, feeling like maybe he could survive his grief after all. He fell asleep, holding her. In the morning, she was gone. No note, no name, no trace except rumpled sheets and the faint scent of her skin. His phone rang with a work emergency, and he left Ashford Ridge within the hour, flying back to handle the crisis. He never looked back, never tried to find her, never thought about her beyond occasional late-night memories. What Sean didn't know was what happened to the girl after she'd slipped out at dawn. Catherine had walked back to staff quarters in yesterday's uniform, praying no one would see. She'd never done anything like that before, never drunk that much, never gone home with a guest, never been so reckless. But something about him had called to her own pain, and she'd made a choice that felt inevitable in the moment and terrifying in the morning light. She went to work, trying to forget it. Weeks later, when she missed her cycle, she told herself it was stress. When the pregnancy test showed positive, she sat on the bathroom floor and cried until she had no tears left. She tried to find him, but she'd never gotten his name, never seen his face clearly through rain and alcohol. The resort refused to give information, citing privacy policies. She had nothing, no name, no contact, no way to find the father of the children growing inside her. When she started showing, she told her mother told her father, and her father, a deacon at their church, looked at her with more disappointment than she'd known a human face could hold. Who is the father? A guest at the resort. I don't know his name. The slap came fast, sharp, shocking. Her mother gasped, but said nothing in her defense. You've shamed this family, shamed yourself. Don't, Catherine said, hand on her cheek, fire in her eyes even through tears. Don't say it. Get out of my house. The words were final. Her mother cried but didn't intervene. In their world, her father's word was law, and Catherine had broken the most fundamental rule. The town turned on her swiftly. She lost her job. Moral standards, they said. Friends stopped calling. Church members whispered. The quiet, good girl had become the cautionary tale. She moved into a tiny room above a garage, working cash jobs, hiding her growing belly until she couldn't. The isolation was crushing. Doctor's appointments alone, maternity clothes from thrift stores, no baby shower, no excited family, no support. When labor started, she called a taxi. She delivered her daughters with only nurses present, and when they asked who to call, she said, "No one. There's no one." Holding Audrey and Bet for the first time, something crystallized in Catherine's heart. These babies were hers, only hers. She would be enough for them. Both parents, every role, everything they needed. The man who'd left her pregnant didn't deserve them. This town that had cast her out didn't deserve to see what she'd built from its rejection. She left Ashford Ridge as soon as she was physically able, taking a bus to New York with 2 infants and $300. She rebuilt herself from zero, piece by painful piece, never looking back, never letting herself think about the man with rain-dark eyes who'd held her like she mattered. Until Sean Williams looked at her daughters and saw himself in their faces. Chapter 3. The Investigation. Sean Williams had built an empire on information, but the file his investigator placed on his desk made him wish some truths stayed buried. The sun rose over Manhattan, painting glass towers gold. Sean hadn't slept. He'd paced his office all night, thinking, remembering fragments. The rain, the woman, the way she'd held him while he fell apart. The morning when she disappeared, his head of security, Frank Morrison, sat across from him with a thick folder and careful neutrality in his expression. "Talk," Sean said. "Catherine Jolie, originally from Ashford Ridge, left town pregnant with twins. No father listed on birth certificates, worked multiple jobs while raising them alone, got her degree online, no criminal record, no debts, no scandals. By all accounts, she's exactly what she appears, a single mother who's worked impossibly hard to build a life for her children." "The timeline," Frank met his eyes. "The dates align perfectly with your corporate retreat. The girls would have been conceived during that week." Sean closed his eyes. He'd known. One look at Audrey and Bet had told him everything, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that hurt. What about Ashford Ridge? What did people say about her? Frank's jaw tightened. "You sure you want to know?" "Everything. The town destroyed her, called her reckless, shameful, worse. Her parents disowned her. She was fired from the resort for moral violations. The community made her an outcast. She left with nothing, no family support, no money, no resources, just 2 newborns and determination." Sean felt sick. "Because of me. You didn't know." "That doesn't make it better." Sean's fist hit the desk. "I destroyed her entire life, her family, her home, her reputation. Gone, because I needed to forget my own pain and then walked away without looking back." "What are you going to do?" Sean looked out at the city, at the empire that suddenly felt hollow. "Make it right." "How?" "I don't know yet. But those are my daughters, and their mother survived something that would have broken most people." He turned back. "I need to know everything else. Where she works, where she lives, discreetly. I don't want her knowing I'm looking." After Frank left, Sean pulled up building security footage. He found Catherine easily, morning shift at the lobby cafe. He watched her arrive before dawn, always dressed professionally despite the casual uniform, always moving with quiet efficiency. She smiled at customers, handled difficult people with grace, kept her workspace immaculate. The footage showed her routine. She brought the twins to work sometimes, letting them do homework at a corner table. She never took personal calls. She never complained. She carried herself with dignity that seemed at odds with serving coffee to executives who probably never saw her as human. Sean watched one clip repeatedly. A man in an expensive suit spilled coffee and screamed at her, blaming her for his clumsiness. Catherine apologized and cleaned up the mess with her head held high. The man walked away, still complaining. Catherine simply returned to work. No tears, no anger visible. Just calm professionalism. She'd learned to be invisible, Sean realized. Learned to take abuse without flinching. Learned to survive in a world that wanted her small. He pulled up her employee file, full-time at the cafe, plus evening shifts in corporate dining, extra hours whenever offered. Performance reviews excellent. Manager's notes, never missed shifts, never called in sick, never caused problems. Because she couldn't afford to, Sean thought. Because she had 2 children and no safety net. Because I left her with nothing. He found her apartment address, a neighborhood that was safe but barely, rent that probably consumed most of her income. He pulled up Street View images and felt his stomach turn. The building was old, worn, the kind of place people lived when they were one emergency away from disaster. While he sat in an office tower making decisions that moved millions, living in luxury he'd never questioned, Catherine Jolie raised his daughters in a one-bedroom apartment and worked 2 jobs to keep them fed. Sean opened another file, his father's records. The estate had been enormous. He'd inherited everything, never struggling, never choosing between food and rent, never begging for opportunities. The contrast was obscene. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Williams, your mother is on line 1. Sean picked up. "Hello, Mother. Darling, I heard you personally conducted interviews yesterday. How unusual." Margaret Williams had never worked but had opinions about everyone who did. Sean felt anger he'd never directed at his mother before. "I found someone extraordinary, someone who's overcome more than most people face in a lifetime. How industrious." Her tone made it clear she thought the opposite. "You'll meet her soon," Sean said, and ended the call. He looked at Catherine's file again, at the photo from her ID badge. She was looking directly at the camera, expression neutral, guarded. But her eyes held something fierce, something unbroken. Sean opened his laptop and began drafting a position description: Director of Community Outreach, reporting directly to CEO. The salary was 6 figures, benefits comprehensive, office on the executive floor. The kind of opportunity that could change someone's life. He knew she'd be suspicious. She'd have every right to be. But he was going to offer it because it was the least he could do, and because he needed to be near her, needed to understand who she was now, needed to find a way into his daughters' lives. He picked up the phone and called HR. "Make an offer to Catherine Jolie. Today, the new director position. Job starts immediately if she accepts." When he hung up, Sean walked to his window and looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, Catherine was working, unaware her life was about to change, unaware that the man who destroyed her was about to walk back into her existence. He just hoped she wouldn't hate him too much when she finally learned the truth. Chapter 4. The offer. She can't refuse. Catherine had spent years learning that powerful men always wanted something, so when Sean Williams offered her a 6-figure salary, she didn't feel grateful. She felt terrified. The phone call came during her afternoon break. HR, professional and efficient, laying out an offer that made no sense. Director of Community Outreach. Salary more than she'd made in 3 years combined. Benefits comprehensive enough to cover everything her daughters might need. An office, an assistant, executive floor access. "I don't understand. I interviewed for a junior marketing position." Mr. Williams was very impressed. "He created this role specifically for you." Red flags waved in Catherine's mind. Men didn't create executive positions for cafe workers unless they wanted something. She'd seen it before, executives who thought service staff were available for more than serving drinks. But this was different. Sean Williams hadn't looked at her that way during the interview. He'd barely looked at her at all. He'd been fixated on the girls. "I need time to consider." "Of course, Mr. Williams hopes you'll start Monday." After the call ended, Catherine sat in the break room, mind racing. This made no sense. Unless Sean Williams had recognized something in the girls' faces, unless he'd done research, unless he knew. The thought sent ice through her veins. If he knew, what did he want? An executive position felt like blood money, like he was trying to buy his way out of guilt. But she thought of Audrey and Bet. Private school instead of overcrowded classrooms. A bigger apartment where they could each have their own room. Security she'd never been able to give them. All the nights she'd worked doubles while they slept at the neighbors. All the time she'd stretch food to make it last. All the dreams she'd deferred because survival took everything. Could she refuse this just because it felt wrong? Monday morning, she called HR and accepted. Her first day was surreal. Security gave her a badge with executive-level access. The elevator that had always been off-limits now opened at her touch. She rode to the 47th floor, feeling like an imposter in her best suit. Her office was beautiful, windows overlooking the city, furniture that cost more than her monthly rent, space that felt impossibly large. An assistant greeted her with genuine warmth and handed her a schedule. "Mr. Williams wants to meet with you this afternoon to discuss programs," the assistant said. "Here's your laptop, phone, and access cards." Catherine took it all, feeling like she was in someone else's life. The morning passed in orientation meetings. She met her team, 3 people who'd report to her, all friendly and excited about new community initiatives. She learned about budgets and programs and philanthropic goals. Everyone treated her like she belonged, like she'd earned this through merit rather than whatever complex game Sean Williams was playing. At 3 o'clock, she walked to Sean's office. Her hands were steady now. Whatever he wanted, she wouldn't play along. She'd do this job brilliantly, provide for her daughters, but she wouldn't be grateful or compliant. Sean was standing by his window when she entered. He turned, and she saw nervousness in his face. "Catherine, thank you for accepting." "Mr. Williams." She stayed near the door, maintaining distance. "I'll be honest, I don't understand why you created this role for me." "Because you're qualified." "No," she cut him off. "I'm not playing games. Why did you create an executive position for someone whose only qualification is serving you coffee?" Sean flinched. "Can we sit?" "I'd rather stand." He nodded, respecting her boundary. "You deserve the truth." He took a breath. "After your interview, I did research. I found out you're from Ashford Ridge. About your daughters when they were born, what happened to you there?" Catherine's heart pounded, but she kept her face neutral. "And I was in Ashford Ridge when they would have been conceived, at a corporate retreat, and they—" He swallowed hard. "They look like me. They have my eyes, my smile. They're my daughters." The room tilted. Catherine gripped the chair back. He knew. He'd figured it out, connected the pieces. And now what? "Say something," Sean said quietly. "What do you want me to say?" Her voice came out cold. "Congratulations on solving the mystery. Yes, those are your daughters, and you've been absent for their entire lives through absolutely no fault of your own. I want to be in their lives. I want to know them, support them." "Support them?" Catherine laughed without humor. "You can't fix this. You can't erase what happened." "I know." "Do you?" She stepped closer, careful control breaking. "Do you know what it was like being pregnant at 18 in a town where everyone knew everyone? Having my own parents disown me, losing my job, my home, my entire community. Do you know what it's like to give birth alone?" Sean's face had gone pale. "No, I can't imagine." "No, you can't. You were here, building your empire, not even remembering the woman you slept with while I was being called every name imaginable, while I was working 3 jobs pregnant, while I was raising your daughters in a 1-bedroom apartment, praying I could keep them fed." "I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Catherine's voice rose. "That's what fixes this? An apology and a job title?" "No, I don't think anything fixes this. I just want to try. I want to be their father. I want to give them what they deserve. They deserve someone who was there from the beginning, someone who chose them. You don't get to walk in now with your guilt and money and play savior." "I'm not trying to play savior. I'm trying to take responsibility." "Responsibility?" Catherine stepped closer and Sean actually stepped back. "You want responsibility? You show up. Every day. You prove you're not going to disappear when it gets hard or inconvenient. You earn the right to call yourself their father because right now you're just a stranger with DNA in common. Tell me how. Tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it." Catherine studied him, really looked for the first time. She saw genuine distress, something raw beneath the CEO exterior, but she'd learned not to trust appearances, not to believe words without action. You want to be in their lives? Prove it. Show up consistently. Not grand gestures, not gifts, not money. Actual presence, actual time, actual effort. And if you fail, if you hurt them, if you make them love you and then disappear, she paused, I will make you regret it for the rest of your life. Sean held her gaze. I won't fail them. Or you. We'll see. She turned to leave, paused at the door. And Mr. Williams, I'm taking this job, and I'm going to excel at it. Not because you gave it to me out of guilt, but because I earned it. I've earned everything I have. Don't ever forget that. She walked out, leaving Sean standing alone, and for the first time since this started, Catherine felt like she had some measure of control. He wanted to be a father. Fine, she'd let him try, but he'd have to prove himself worthy of the daughters she'd raised alone, and she wasn't going to make it easy. Chapter 5. The Truth That Changes Nothing. Catherine had imagined this moment 1,000 times, facing the man who disappeared into the dawn. But in none of those imagined conversations had she felt this cold, clarifying rage. The confrontation happened Friday afternoon, end of Catherine's first week as Director of Community Outreach. She'd thrown herself into work with fierce determination, learning systems, meeting partners, drafting proposals that made her team excited. She'd proven in 5 days what she'd known all along. She belonged in this role, regardless of how she'd gotten there. But Sean had been circling her all week, attending her meetings, requesting updates, finding reasons to stop by her office. Always professional, always appropriate, but always there. Every time she looked up to find him watching, she felt the weight of unspoken truth pressing down. Friday at 5, he appeared in her doorway. "Do you have plans tonight?" "I always have plans. I have 2 daughters." "I know. I was hoping we could have dinner, the 3 of you and me." "No." Catherine didn't look up from her computer. "Catherine, I said no. You don't get to have dinner with my daughters like we're some happy family." Sean stepped in and closed the door. "Then let's talk. Just you and me. There are things I need to say, and we can't keep having this conversation in pieces." Something in his tone made her look up. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept all week. Good, she thought. Fine, but not here. Not your office, not this building where everyone works for you. "Where?" "Coffee shop 2 blocks from here, 30 minutes. The coffee shop was neutral ground, public enough that nothing dramatic would happen, quiet enough for honest conversation. Catherine arrived first, ordering tea she didn't want. When Sean walked in, several people recognized him, but he ignored the attention and sat across from her. "Thank you for meeting." "I didn't agree for you. I agreed because we need boundaries, and clearly you're not good at taking hints." Sean nodded, accepting the blow. "I deserve that." "Don't fish for absolution. I'm not here to make you feel better." "I'm not asking you to." He leaned forward. "I've spent this week trying to understand what happened from your perspective. I talked to people from Ashford Ridge." Catherine's head snapped up. "You what?" "I needed to know what you went through, what I caused. You had no right. I had every right to understand what my actions did." Sean's voice rose, then dropped. "They told me everything. How the town treated you, what they called you, how your family disowned you, how you left with nothing." Catherine's hands tightened around her cup until knuckles went white. "And what did you expect to learn?" "I learned you survived something that would have destroyed most people. I learned you raised 2 incredible children while working multiple jobs. I learned every person who knows you describes you as extraordinary. Stop trying to flatter me." "It's not flattery, it's truth." His eyes were intense. "I spent that week in Ashford Ridge drunk and grieving my father. I barely remember most of it. I remember a woman who was kind when I was falling apart. I remember feeling less alone. I remember feeling something real. Then I woke up and you were gone, and I left and never looked back because that's what I did with everything difficult. Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? No, I'm explaining why I didn't remember you. Not as an excuse, there is no excuse, but as a reason. I was so drunk, so shattered, so disconnected that I couldn't have found you if I'd wanted to. And the worst part? I didn't want to. I went back to New York and buried myself in work and forgot, because remembering meant feeling, and I didn't know how to feel anything real." Catherine stared at him, seeing genuine remorse, genuine self-awareness. She'd expected defensiveness, excuses, attempts to minimize. Instead, he was laying himself bare. "You think that makes it better? That you were grieving?" "No, nothing makes it better." "Because of your choice," Catherine corrected. "You chose to drink that much. You chose to sleep with someone whose name you didn't learn. You chose to leave without looking back. Those were choices, and I've lived with the consequences while you lived in ignorance." "You're right." The simple agreement threw her off. She'd expected argument. Instead, he was accepting everything without deflection. "So what now?" she asked. "You've acknowledged it. You feel guilty. What does that change?" "I want to be in their lives, not because I deserve it. I don't. But because they deserve a father who cares, who provides, who shows up. I've provided for them just fine." "I know, but you shouldn't have had to do it alone. Maybe I can't change the past, but I can change the future." Catherine laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what you're signing up for. Parenting isn't board meetings. It's homework and doctor's appointments and parent-teacher conferences. It's being exhausted and needed constantly. It's boring and hard and relentless. I want to learn. Why? Why do you care about 2 children you didn't know existed a week ago?" "Because they're mine." The words came fierce, certain. "Because when I looked at them, I saw my eyes, my smile. Because I've spent this week looking at photos online from school events and seeing pieces of myself. But more than that," he paused, "I see pieces of you. Their strength, confidence, kindness. You've raised remarkable children, and I hate that I wasn't there. I hate that I missed everything. I can't get that back, but I can be there for what's left." Catherine felt something crack in her armor. She'd spent so long telling herself the father didn't matter, that she was enough. But seeing Sean's face as he talked about missing their childhoods, he was mourning something too. Not the same way she'd suffered, but a real loss. "You'll hurt them," she said, voice shaking slightly. "Not intentionally, maybe, but eventually you'll get bored or busy, and they'll realize you're not committed. It will break their hearts." "Then help me not do that. Tell me how to be there. Teach me, I'm asking. Give me a chance to prove I'm not going anywhere." Catherine looked at him across the table, this powerful man begging for a chance. Part of her wanted to refuse out of spite, but a larger part, the part that loved Audrey and Bet more than her own pain, recognized they deserved a father who wanted them. "If I agree, you follow my rules. You don't show up unannounced. You don't buy their affection. You don't get to be the fun weekend dad while I handle the hard parts. You commit fully or not at all." "Done." "And Sean?" She held his gaze. "If you hurt them, if you make them love you and then disappear, I won't just make you regret it. I'll make sure they know exactly why you left. I won't protect your image. I'll tell them the truth." Sean nodded. "Fair. I won't give you reason to." Catherine stood, gathering her things. She still didn't trust him, still felt the weight of 7 years struggling alone, but she was willing to let him try because her daughters deserved every chance. "We'll start slow. Supervised visits, brief interactions. You earn their trust before you get real time. Whatever it takes." As Catherine walked out, she felt her life shifting again. For years, it had been just the 3 of them against the world. Now someone else was entering, and she didn't know if that would make things better or infinitely worse. But she'd survived worse than uncertainty. If Sean Williams wanted to be part of their lives, he'd have to prove himself worthy. And Catherine wasn't going to make it easy. Chapter 6. The man who thought guilt was enough. Sean Williams had never failed at anything in his life, but 3 weeks of trying to prove himself to Catherine Jolie made him understand the difference between success and earning something that mattered. The first supervised visit happened on Saturday at a public park. Catherine brought the twins, and Sean showed up with a picnic basket and nervous energy that made him feel 16. The girls were shy at first, hiding behind their mother's legs, but eventually Bet's curiosity won out. "Did you really build all those buildings downtown?" "My company did. Lots of people worked together." "Mama says you're important," Audrey added, cautious. Sean looked at Catherine. "Your mama is important. She's one of the most important people I've ever met." Catherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. She sat on a bench nearby, always watching, never relaxing. Sean understood. He was on probation. Every interaction was a test. They spent 2 hours at the park. Sean pushed swings, helped them navigate climbing structures, listened to elaborate stories about school and friends. They were bright, funny, kind, so much like Catherine in their thoughtfulness. When Audrey fell and scraped her knee, she ran to Catherine first. Sean felt a sharp pang watching his daughter seek comfort from the only parent she'd ever known. "Next week?" he asked as they were leaving. "Maybe," Catherine said. Not a yes. The pattern continued. Brief, supervised visits where Sean learned his daughter's personalities. Bet was bold, talkative, asking questions constantly. Audrey was quieter, more observant, taking longer to warm up but offering deep insights when she spoke. Both were smart, and Sean realized that was Catherine's influence. She'd raised them to be thoughtful, curious, engaged. He tried offering financial support. Catherine refused. He tried buying gifts, toys, books, clothes. Catherine returned them with a note. "They need your time, not your money." He suggested moving them to a better apartment. Catherine's response was icy. "Our home is fine." Every attempt to use resources to fix things was rebuffed. Sean began understanding that Catherine didn't want his wealth. She wanted his presence. She wanted him to show up not with grand gestures but with consistency. So he adjusted. He started attending school events, fall festival, book fair, parent information night. He sat in tiny chairs in brightly decorated classrooms, listening to teachers talk about reading levels and social development. He learned which classmates the girls liked, which subjects challenged them, what they were working on in art. He picked them up from school on Fridays, always with Catherine present, never alone. He helped with homework at the kitchen table in their small apartment, relearning basic math and reading comprehension. He learned Bet hated vegetables and Audrey was afraid of thunderstorms. He learned their bedtime routines, favorite songs, recurring nightmares. It was exhausting in ways board meetings never were. It required patience he hadn't known he possessed. And Catherine never made it easier. She watched everything, corrected him when too permissive, called him out when he tried to be the fun parent who let rules slide. "No ice cream before dinner," she'd say firmly, "but it's just, no. They have rules for a reason. You don't get to undermine them because you want them to like you." Sean learned to follow her lead, to respect boundaries she'd established, to understand that parenting was about more than affection. It was structure and consistency, and sometimes saying no when you wanted to say yes. His family made everything harder. Margaret was horrified. "You can't seriously be considering acknowledging these children," she said during a tense lunch. "Think of the scandal." "They're my daughters," Sean said flatly. "They're illegitimate children from some woman who—" "Don't!" Sean's voice cut like a blade. "Don't speak about Catherine that way. She raised my children alone while I lived in luxury. She survived being ostracized. She worked multiple jobs while pregnant and caring for infant twins. She's extraordinary. If you can't see that, then you're not the woman I thought you were." Margaret's face froze in shock. Sean had never spoken to her like that. His sister Claire was worse. She started subtle rumors in their social circles, whispers about gold diggers and trapped men, implications that Catherine had sought him out deliberately. When Sean heard, he confronted her at a family dinner. "Stop spreading lies about Catherine. I'm concerned about you being taken advantage of." "The only person who took advantage was me. I left her pregnant and alone without knowing her name. She didn't seek me out. I found her. She didn't ask for anything. I forced my way in. If anyone's a victim, it's Catherine and my daughters. And if I hear one more whisper, I'll cut you out completely." The silence was absolute. Even Margaret looked shocked, but the confrontation crystallized something. His family's approval didn't matter. What mattered was Audrey and Bet, and proving to Catherine he could be the father his daughters deserved. Still, progress was glacially slow. Catherine never softened, never invited him deeper, never looked at him with anything warmer than cautious tolerance. Sean began realizing he'd misunderstood. He'd thought if he showed up consistently, Catherine would eventually forgive him. But forgiveness wasn't what she was withholding. It was trust. And trust couldn't be rushed or forced. It had to be built slowly through countless small actions. One evening, after a particularly exhausting homework session where Bet had a meltdown over math, Sean sat at Catherine's kitchen table while she made dinner. The girls were in their room. "I don't know how you did this alone," Sean said quietly. Just tonight was overwhelming. How did you manage when they were babies? Catherine didn't look up from chopping vegetables. You do what you have to do. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. When you're responsible for keeping two tiny humans alive, you don't get a choice. You survive, one day at a time. Weren't you terrified? Every single day. She finally looked at him, eyes holding exhaustion he was only beginning to understand. Terrified I wasn't doing it right. Terrified I'd mess them up. Terrified something would happen to me and they'd have no one. Terrified constantly. You never asked for help. Who would I ask? My family who'd disowned me, my hometown that called me shameful, the father whose name I didn't know. I learned early that the only person I could depend on was myself. You're not alone anymore. Catherine's laugh was bitter. Aren't I? You've been here a few weeks. You've attended some school events and helped with homework. That's assistance. And assistance can be withdrawn any time. I'm not going to withdraw. You say that now. But what happens when your family pressures you enough? When this becomes more trouble than it's worth? When you meet someone you actually want to build a life with? Sean started to protest, but Catherine held up her hand. I'm not being cruel. I'm protecting my daughters. They're already starting to love you. I can see it. And if you leave, it will devastate them. Then help me stay. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Time, Catherine said simply. That's the only thing that proves anything. Time and consistency. I survived 7 years of the hardest thing imaginable. You've survived a few weeks of inconvenience. We're not the same. The words hit like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. He'd been congratulating himself on his commitment, his sacrifice. But compared to what Catherine had endured, he'd done nothing. I'm sorry. I don't want apologies. I want action. Consistent, boring, unglamorous action. I want you here for stomach flus and bad report cards and friendship drama. I want you here when it's not fun, when they're difficult, when there's nothing rewarding except knowing you're doing your job. I'll be here. Catherine turned back to cooking. We'll see. And that was all he'd get. Not forgiveness, not warmth, not approval. Just a chance to prove himself, day by day. It would have to be enough. Chapter 7. The patience of a woman who's already survived. Catherine had learned that powerful men crumbled under sustained pressure, so she didn't make Sean's redemption easy. She made it relentless, exhausting, and absolutely necessary. Seasons changed. Winter arrived cold and sharp, bringing new routines and new tests. The park visits moved indoors. Museums, libraries, play spaces. Homework sessions continued, now including projects and presentations. Sean showed up for everything Catherine allowed, never missing scheduled times, never complaining about rigid boundaries. But Catherine didn't soften. If anything, she became more demanding as Sean proved consistency. She called when Bet had a fever and needed pickup during a workday. She asked him to attend a parent-teacher conference last minute when her schedule conflicted. She tested whether he'd show up for unglamorous parts, sick children, school permission slips, field trips requiring time off work. Sean passed every test. He left board meetings early to pick up sick children. He rearranged his schedule for conferences. He learned to check backpacks for permission slips and pack lunches meeting school guidelines. His professional life began suffering, not catastrophically but noticeably. He missed networking events. He turned down speaking engagements. He delegated more because he couldn't work 16-hour days anymore. Margaret noticed, and her disapproval reached new heights. You're damaging your career for this situation. I'm being a father. If that damages my career, then my career wasn't worth having. But Margaret's interference didn't stop. She made calls to board members, expressing concern about Sean's focus. She made pointed comments at charity events about complicated situations. She even approached Catherine directly at a company event. Catherine was presenting her community program to donors when Margaret cornered her near the refreshments. Ms. Jolie, we should talk. Catherine recognized Sean's mother from photos. She set down her water carefully. Mrs. Williams. I understand you've worked your way into my son's life rather thoroughly. I didn't work my way into anything. Sean found us and insisted on being involved. Yes, well. Margaret's smile was arctic. I'm sure you understand my concerns. Sean has responsibilities, a position in society. These complications are distracting him from what matters. His daughters matter. Of course, but there are appropriate ways to handle these situations. Discreet support, private arrangements. Surely you can see this public display. This public display? Catherine's voice dropped dangerously low. You mean my children existing? You mean them knowing their father? I mean Sean is jeopardizing his future for his children. Say it. And you're horrified because you care more about appearances than people. Margaret's face hardened. You have no idea. Don't I? Catherine stepped closer. Margaret backed up slightly. I know Sean was raised by people who taught him money and status matter more than connection. I know he was grieving his father and had no one who taught him how to process loss. I know he was so desperate to feel something real that he slept with a stranger and then ran away rather than face vulnerability. All of that came from somewhere. Someone taught him to be emotionally disconnected. Someone taught him that performance mattered more than presence. How dare you? I dare because I paid the price for how your family operates. But here's what you need to understand, Mrs. Williams. Your son is trying to break that pattern. He's trying to be better than what he was raised to be. Every time you pressure him, every time you make him feel like his daughters are inconveniences, you're proving exactly why he needs to change. Margaret's face was fury incarnate. You think you know my son? I know he's trying, and I know you're making it harder. Catherine picked up her water again, hands steady. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have donors to thank. She walked away, feeling Margaret's stare burning into her back. That night, Sean called, clearly distressed. My mother said you two talked. We did. She said you were incredibly rude. I was honest. If she experienced that as rude, that's her problem. Catherine paused. Are you calling to take her side? No. God, no. I'm calling to apologize for her and to tell you I'm going to set harder boundaries with my family. They need to understand you and the girls aren't up for debate. Sean, you don't have to blow up your family relationships. Yes, I do. Because you were right. Everything you said to my mother was right. I was raised to value performance over presence, status over substance. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of pretending that world matters more than what actually matters. After the call, Catherine sat in her quiet apartment, listening to the twins' soft breathing from their room. For the first time, she wondered if Sean might actually be serious about changing, not just showing up, but fundamentally transforming who he was. But she still didn't let herself trust it fully. As winter progressed into early spring, routines deepened. Sean became a fixture, not just weekend visits, but weeknight dinners, school pickups, homework help. The girls stopped being shy. They started calling him Sean instead of Mr. Williams, and sometimes in unguarded moments they'd start to say Dad before catching themselves. Catherine watched this with relief and terror. Relief because her daughters deserved a father. Terror because they were falling in love with him, and if he left, the damage would be catastrophic. She maintained vigilance, never letting Sean see her soften, never acknowledging he was succeeding. She knew from experience that men only changed when they believed the alternative was losing something they couldn't afford to lose. So she kept him working for it, kept boundaries firm, kept herself emotionally distant even as he became more present. But privately, late at night when she couldn't sleep, Catherine acknowledged a truth she wouldn't speak aloud. Sean was proving himself. Day by day, week by week, he was showing up. And part of her, the part she'd spent years hardening against hope, was starting to believe he might actually stay. One Saturday, during a library visit, Audrey reached for Sean's hand while crossing the street. It was automatic, unconscious, the way children reach for parents. Sean looked down at her small hand in his with profound emotion. Catherine had to look away. Later, as they browsed books, Bet asked, Sean, why didn't you know about us before? The question froze everyone. Sean looked at Catherine, clearly asking permission. She gave the slightest nod. Because your mama and I only knew each other for one night a long time ago, and I left before learning important things, like her name, and that you two were going to exist. It was a mistake, not you two, never you, but me leaving was a mistake. I can't change the past, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again. Promise? Audrey asked, voice small. I promise. Catherine watched her daughters' faces as they processed this, saw hope blooming there. Hope that maybe, finally, they'd have what other children had. And that hope terrified her because she knew how devastating it would be if Sean broke it. That night, after dropping the girls home and before Sean left, Catherine stopped him at the door. Don't make promises you can't keep. I can keep this one. You don't know that. Life is complicated. Circumstances change. My feelings won't change. I love them, Catherine. I know I haven't earned the right to say it, but I love them. They're my daughters, and I would do anything for them. Words are easy. Then watch my actions. That's all I'm asking. Catherine studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity, but all she saw was exhaustion, determination, and something that looked like genuine love. Okay. But Sean, the moment you falter, the moment you fail to show up, I will make sure they know it wasn't their fault. I'll take all the blame for letting you in, but I'll also make sure they know exactly who you really were. You won't need to, because I'm not going anywhere. As he left, Catherine closed the door and leaned against it, feeling something shift inside her fortress. Not trust, not yet, but maybe, possibly, the beginning of belief, and that terrified her more than anything. Chapter 8. The Fortress. She built to survive. Sean had broken through every wall in his life, except the one Catherine built from necessity. And he was beginning to understand that some fortresses weren't meant to be stormed, they had to be earned brick by brick. Spring brought transformation, cherry blossoms bloomed across the city, and with them came shifts in Sean's relationship with his daughters. They no longer hesitated when reaching for him. They shared secrets about school drama and friend conflicts. They asked his opinion on things that mattered to them. They'd stopped calling him Sean and started, tentatively, calling him Dad. The first time Bet said it, casually, asking, Dad, can you help with my science project? Sean froze completely. Catherine had been there, and he'd looked at her instinctively, asking silent permission. She'd given the smallest nod, and he'd felt something profound shift in his chest. But Catherine herself remained unreachable, professional at work, civil at home, never warm, never soft. She didn't smile at him the way she smiled at her daughters. She didn't share personal thoughts. She maintained absolute emotional distance even as she allowed him deeper into their daily lives. It frustrated Sean in ways he hadn't anticipated. He'd proven commitment. He'd been consistent for months. He'd sacrificed career advancement, family relationships, social standing. He'd shown up for every unglamorous moment, sick days, homework meltdowns, parent-teacher conferences that ran long. He'd learned their favorite foods, their bedtime rituals, the specific way Audrey liked her sandwiches cut, and how Bet needed 3 stories before she'd settle down to sleep. He knew his daughters, but he didn't know their mother. Not really. Not beyond the carefully controlled surface she presented to the world. He finally asked directly one evening. The girls were asleep, and he'd stayed late helping with tax paperwork. Catherine had mentioned she was stressed about it, and he'd offered assistance she'd surprisingly accepted. They sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by forms and receipts, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant city sounds. Sean set down his pen and looked at her. Really looked at her. She had reading glasses perched on her nose, hair pulled back in a messy knot, wearing soft clothes instead of her usual armor of professional attire. She looked younger like this, more vulnerable, more like the girl who'd held him in the rain. Catherine, can we talk? We're talking. She didn't look up from the form she was reviewing. About us. Her head came up sharply, and he saw wariness flash across her face before she shuttered it. There is no us. There's co-parenting. Exactly my point. Why isn't there an us? When she just stared at him, he continued, words he'd been holding back for weeks finally breaking free. I've been showing up for months. I've proven commitment to the girls. I've changed my entire life to be present. I've stood up to my family, restructured my career, learned how to braid hair and help with homework. When do you let me in? I have let you in. You're here almost every day. That's not what I mean. Sean leaned forward, frustration and something deeper bleeding into his voice. You let me into their lives, but not yours. You keep this wall between us that never closes no matter what I do, and I'm trying to understand why. What more do I have to prove? Catherine set down her pen carefully, precisely, the way she did everything. When she spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. You want to know why I keep you at a distance? Yes, please, help me understand. Because 7 years ago, you left me in pieces, and I had to rebuild myself into someone who could never be broken again. Her eyes met his, and they held steel forged in fire. You think a few months of showing up erases that? You think homework help and school pickups prove you won't disappear? I'm not going to disappear. You say that now. Catherine stood abruptly, chair scraping against linoleum. She paced to the window, arms wrapped around herself like armor. But what happens when this gets harder, when the novelty wears off, when you meet someone you actually want, someone without all my baggage, someone who doesn't come with 7 years of trauma and trust issues, when your family finally gives you an ultimatum you can't ignore? None of that will happen. You don't know that. She spun to face him, and for the first time since he'd known her, really known her, he saw genuine cracks in her armor. Her voice rose slightly, control slipping. You can't promise life won't change or circumstances won't shift, or you won't wake up one day and realize this isn't what you want. And if I let you in, if I trust you, if I let myself feel something for you, and you leave, I'll survive. I always survive. But my daughters won't. They're already building their lives around the idea that you're permanent, and if you're not, it will devastate them in ways I can't protect them from. Sean stood moving closer but giving her space, not crowding. So what are you saying? That I'm on probation forever? That no matter what I do, you'll never believe I'm committed? I'm saying trust isn't a switch I can flip because you've checked boxes on some redemption checklist. She turned back to the window, staring out at the city lights. Trust is built over time, through consistent action, when there's nothing to be gained from it. You've been motivated by guilt. You've been trying to prove something to yourself, to me, to the world. What happens when you've proven it? When the guilt fades and you're just left with the reality of being tied to someone you never chose? Love, Sean said quietly, and the word hung between them. Love keeps me here. Catherine laughed, but it was bitter, sharp-edged. You don't love me. You barely know me. That's where you're wrong. Sean took another step closer. I know you survived something most people couldn't. I know you raised 2 incredible children alone while working multiple jobs. I know you got your degree online while working full-time and parenting. I know you're brilliant at your job, fierce in protecting your daughters, and unwilling to accept anything less than what you've earned. He paused, letting each word land. I know you take your coffee black because you learned to like it that way when you couldn't afford milk. I know you check the girls' backpacks every night, even though they're responsible enough to pack them themselves, because you need that control. I know you stand at this window sometimes late at night when you think everyone's asleep, because this is where you let yourself feel everything you can't show during the day. Catherine's shoulders tensed. Stop. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met, he continued, gentler now. And yes, I love you. Not the memory of a drunken night, not an idea or an obligation. You, the woman you are now, the woman you made yourself become through sheer force of will. Stop. Catherine's voice shook. Don't do this. Don't do what? Tell the truth. Don't make this about us. This was always supposed to be about Audrey and Bet. It is about them. Sean moved closer still, close enough that he could see her reflection in the window, see the tears she was fighting. But it's also about us. We're their parents, Catherine. We're going to be in each other's lives forever. Why can't that be more than just co-parenting? Why can't we be honest about what's building between us? Because I can't afford to be wrong about you. The words burst out, raw and honest and painful. She turned to face him, and tears were streaming down her face now, no longer held back. I can't afford to let you in and have you leave, because then I'll have lost twice. Once when you left me pregnant and alone, and again when I was stupid enough to believe you'd changed. I've built everything I have on being careful, on protecting myself, on not trusting anyone to be there when it matters. If I let that go, if I trust you and you fail, it won't just break my heart. It will prove that I'm exactly as stupid and reckless as everyone in Ashford Ridge said I was. Sean saw it clearly then, the real barrier between them. It wasn't about him proving commitment to the girls. It was about Catherine protecting herself from the vulnerability of believing someone could love her, could stay, could be trusted with her heart. Every wall she'd built, every bit of distance she maintained, was about survival. About never being that broken girl again. "You're not stupid or reckless," Sean said, and his own voice was rough with emotion. "You were 18 and kind to someone who was suffering. That's not a flaw. That's beautiful." "Beautiful?" Catherine's voice broke on the word. "It destroyed my life. It created new life. 2 lives. 2 beautiful, brilliant daughters who exist because you were brave enough to be kind when you were hurting too." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped a tear from her cheek. She didn't pull away. "And yes, you suffered, and that's on me. Every moment of pain you endured is my responsibility. But you also survived and became extraordinary. That's on you. That's all you." They stood in her small kitchen, air charged with everything unspoken, everything denied, everything they'd both been holding back. Sean could see Catherine wavering, decades of careful control cracking under the weight of everything she'd been carrying alone. "I can't," she whispered, but it sounded less like conviction and more like prayer. "I can't let myself hope again. Hope hurts too much when it's destroyed." "Then don't hope," Sean said softly. "Just watch. Watch what I do. Watch me show up day after day, month after month, year after year. Watch me choose you and the girls over everything else, over my career, my family's approval, my comfort, my pride. Watch me become the person I should have been all along, and maybe eventually you'll believe it, or maybe you won't, but I'll still be here." Catherine closed her eyes, and more tears leaked from the corners, tracking down her face in the dim kitchen light. "And if I never believe it, if I can't let go of what happened, if I'm too broken to ever trust someone again, then I'll keep proving it anyway," Sean said simply. "Because you're worth it. They're worth it. This, whatever we could be, whatever we're building, is worth it. Even if it takes the rest of my life to convince you." She opened her eyes, wet but clear, and looked at him with something like wonder, mixed with terror. "I don't know how to do this, how to trust someone again, how to let someone in." "You don't have to know how. You don't have to have it figured out." Sean's hand was still on her face, and she hadn't pulled away, and that felt like progress, like hope, like something precious. "You just have to not completely shut the door, just leave it open a crack. That's all I'm asking." She studied him for a long moment, and Sean felt like everything hinged on whatever she was about to say. Her walls were cracking. He could see it, but he also knew she could rebuild them in an instant if she felt threatened, if he pushed too hard. Finally she nodded once, barely perceptible, but there. "Okay," she whispered. "But Sean, go slow. I need slow. I need time." "As slow as you need," Sean promised. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, standing in her small kitchen with tears on her face and his hand on her cheek, Catherine let herself believe it might be true. The conversation shifted something fundamental between them. Not dramatically. Catherine didn't suddenly become warm and open. But there was a softening, subtle but real. She met his eyes more often. She shared small details about her day. She laughed occasionally at his jokes instead of just tolerating them. She let him stay later in the evenings. She accepted his help with things she'd always handled alone. It was small, it was slow, but it was real. And then, just as Sean began to believe they might actually build something together, everything changed. Sean's mother had a cardiac event at a high-profile charity gala. Sudden, severe, collapsing in the middle of the ballroom surrounded by New York's elite. Paramedics were called, but delayed by traffic. People panicked, crowding around, getting in the way, making everything worse. Catherine, attending as part of her outreach role, pushed through the crowd without hesitation. She'd worked as a nursing assistant while pregnant, one of her many jobs, and the training kicked in immediately, instinctively. "Everyone back, give her space." Her voice cut through chaos with absolute authority. People listened, responding to the command in her tone. She knelt beside Margaret, checking vitals, positioning her correctly. "Someone get an AED, now." Sean watched, frozen by fear, as Catherine took control. She performed CPR with practiced precision, counting compressions, giving rescue breaths, keeping his mother alive while everyone else just watched uselessly. Someone brought the AED. She attached it with steady hands, following prompts, shocking Margaret's heart back into rhythm. By the time paramedics arrived, Margaret was stable but unconscious. They loaded her onto a stretcher, and Sean moved to follow. "Go," Catherine said to him, meeting his eyes. "I'll get the girls and meet you there." At the hospital, surgeons worked for hours. Serious cardiac event, they said. Significant damage. Without immediate intervention, she likely wouldn't have survived. The woman who'd performed CPR had saved her life. "That was Catherine Jolie," Sean told the doctors, voice rough with unshed tears. Their expressions showed surprise. They'd clearly heard Margaret's opinions about Catherine. But all they said was, "She's a hero. She saved your mother's life." When Margaret woke, hours later, groggy but alive, Sean sat beside her bed, holding her hand. "What happened?" "You collapsed at the gala. Cardiac event. You needed CPR and defibrillation." "Who?" Margaret's voice was weak, confused. "Catherine. She saved your life." Margaret's eyes widened, then filled with tears. Real tears, not the careful tears she'd learned to produce for social situations, but genuine emotion breaking through decades of control. "I need to see her," she said. "Please. Mom, you need rest. Now, please, Sean, I need to see her now." Catherine arrived with Audrey and Bet shortly after, all three of them showing signs of stress and fear. The girls hung back, scared by all the medical equipment, the beeping monitors, their grandmother looking small and fragile in the hospital bed. But Catherine approached calmly, professionally, the same way she approached everything. "I'm glad you're recovering, Mrs. Williams." "You saved my life," Margaret said, voice cracking with emotion. "After everything I've said and done, after how I've treated you, you saved my life." "I couldn't not," Catherine said simply. "You needed help." "Why?" Margaret's tears spilled over and she looked genuinely confused, genuinely broken. "Why would you help me after how I've treated you? After the things I've said, the rumors I've spread, the ways I've tried to make your life difficult?" Catherine was quiet for a moment, considering. Then she said, with devastating simplicity, "Because that's who I am. That's who I've always been. The question isn't why I saved you. The question is, who are you?" And with that simple question, something broke in Margaret Williams. Chapter 9. The fire that burns away everything false. Catherine Jolie had saved herself 100 times, but the moment she saw Margaret Williams collapse in the middle of a charity gala, she didn't hesitate to save the woman who'd spent months trying to destroy her. The hospital room was quiet, except for steady monitor beeps. Sean had taken Audrey and Bet to the cafeteria, giving Margaret and Catherine space for a conversation years overdue. Margaret looked diminished in the hospital bed, usual armor of expensive clothes and perfect makeup replaced by a hospital gown and exhaustion. But her eyes were clear, and they held something Catherine had never seen there before: genuine remorse. I need to apologize, really apologize, not the society version where you say words but don't mean them. You don't owe me anything because I helped. I didn't do it for gratitude. I know. That's what makes it worse. Margaret struggled to sit up. Catherine automatically adjusted the bed, medical training taking over. I've spent months trying to make your life difficult. Spreading rumors, pressuring Sean, making it clear you weren't welcome, and you just saved my life without hesitation. You're Sean's mother. He loves you. That was enough reason. But it shouldn't have been. Not after how I've treated you. Margaret's voice grew stronger despite physical weakness. I need you to understand why, not as an excuse, there is no excuse, but as an explanation. Catherine sat in the visitor's chair, waiting. Sean's father was a difficult man. Brilliant, successful, but cold, emotionally distant. He built an empire but couldn't build relationships, and I was complicit in that world. The appearances, the performance, the idea that status mattered more than substance. I raised Sean in that environment. Teaching him success meant power and wealth and social standing. I taught him to be exactly like his father. She paused, gathering strength. When his father died, Sean fell apart in ways I couldn't handle. He was grieving, vulnerable, human, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I pushed him back into performance mode, back to work, back to appearances, back to pretending everything was fine. I never taught him how to process real emotions because I didn't know how myself. What does this have to do with me? Everything. When you came into his life, or rather, when he discovered you'd always been there, he started changing. Choosing presence over performance, choosing his daughters over status, choosing real connection over social approval, and it terrified me because it meant I'd failed as a mother. If the choices I'd taught him were wrong, then I was wrong. I couldn't face that. Catherine listened, seeing decades of pain in Margaret's face. So I tried to destroy it. I tried to drive you away, to pressure Sean, to make the whole situation so uncomfortable that it would collapse. Because if it collapsed, I could tell myself the old way was right. That emotional distance and social standing were what mattered, that I hadn't ruined my son by teaching him to be exactly like his father. But you did teach him that, Catherine said quietly. Sean was so disconnected from his emotions that he drank himself into oblivion and slept with someone whose name he didn't learn. He was so trained to run from feeling that he left the next morning and never looked back. That came from somewhere. Someone taught him that. The words were harsh but honest. Margaret absorbed them like physical blows. You're right. I did that. And watching him try to undo that damage, watching him choose vulnerability and connection, has been devastating because it means confronting everything I got wrong. Margaret's tears flowed freely. But you know what the worst part is? You're exactly the kind of woman I should have taught Sean to value. Strong, resilient, genuine. Someone who survived the unimaginable and came out extraordinary, and instead of celebrating that, I tried to destroy it because it threatened my worldview. What are you asking from me? Nothing. I don't deserve anything. I'm just asking you to let me try to be better. For Sean's sake, for Audrey and Bet's sake. They deserve a grandmother who sees them as blessings, not complications. And Sean deserves a mother who supports his growth instead of trying to pull him back. Catherine studied Margaret, looking for performance, manipulation, but all she saw was genuine brokenness, genuine desire to change. I don't need your approval. I never did. I built my life on not needing anyone's approval. But you're right. Your grandchildren deserve better than a grandmother who treats them like mistakes. And Sean deserves better than a mother who pressures him to choose between family and family. I know, and I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be that person. How? How do you prove you've changed when you've spent months trying to destroy me? The same way Sean proved it to you. Consistent action over time, showing up, being present, choosing relationship over reputation. Margaret's smile was weak but genuine. He learned that from you, you know. How to prove himself through action rather than words. That's all you, not me. Despite herself, Catherine felt something soften. It won't be easy. I don't forgive quickly. I wouldn't trust you if you did. Forgiveness that comes too easy isn't real change. Margaret reached out tentatively. After a moment, Catherine took her hand. Thank you for saving my life, not just physically tonight, but for saving Sean's life by refusing to let him stay the person I made him. Catherine left the room feeling disoriented. She'd spent so long seeing Margaret as an enemy that experiencing her vulnerability felt surreal. Could people really change? Could decades of patterns shift? She found Sean in the cafeteria with the girls, who were coloring while he watched them with exhausted love. How is she? He asked immediately. Stable, recovering. We talked. About? Everything. Catherine sat down. Bet immediately climbed into her lap. She apologized, really apologized. Sean's eyebrows rose. My mother apologized? People change when confronted with mortality. Catherine stroked Bet's hair absently, or maybe she was always capable but needed the right catalyst. You mean she needed you to literally save her life? Maybe. Catherine met his eyes. Sean, I need to tell you something. Okay. I've been keeping you at a distance because I was terrified of being hurt again, of trusting someone and having them leave. But tonight, watching your mother almost die, watching how you fell apart at the thought of losing her, I realized something. What? That love isn't safe. That trusting people always involves risk. That the only way to avoid pain is to avoid connection completely. She paused. And I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want to teach my daughters that protecting yourself means never letting anyone in. Sean's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm tired of keeping you at arm's length. I'm tired of pretending I don't have feelings just because feelings are dangerous. I'm tired of being so controlled and careful that I can't enjoy what we're building. Catherine, let me finish. She held up a hand. I'm not promising I'll suddenly be open and trusting. I'm not promising this will be easy. But I'm saying I'm willing to try, to let you in, to see if we can be more than just co-parents who tolerate each other. Sean looked like he wanted to vault over the table, but the cafeteria and their daughters prevented it. Instead, he just smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his whole face. I'll take it, whatever you can give, however long it takes. Audrey looked up from coloring. Take what? Your mum is saying we're all going to be closer as a family, Sean explained. Like a real family? Bet asked hopefully. Catherine and Sean exchanged looks, and Catherine saw her own hopes and fears reflected in his face. Yeah, Catherine said softly, like a real family. Over following weeks, Margaret's recovery was swift, but the change in her was slower and more profound. She reached out to Catherine tentatively, asking to spend time with Audrey and Bet, under supervision at first, then gradually with more independence as she proved genuine change. She apologized publicly, making clear in their social circles that Catherine was family, that the twins were her beloved grandchildren, that anyone who didn't accept them wasn't welcome in her life. The social repercussions were swift. Some people pulled away, but others rallied with support Catherine had never expected. Sean's sister Claire was slower to come around, but even she began making tentative overtures, influenced by their mother's transformation. And through it all, Catherine let her walls come down, inch by careful inch. She started sharing more with Sean, her fears, her dreams, her thoughts about the future. She laughed more freely. She allowed physical affection beyond polite distance. She stopped treating every interaction like a test. She was learning slowly that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that trust could be built, that sometimes, rarely, people really did change. But they hadn't talked about what they were becoming to each other. They hadn't defined the shift from co-parents to something more. They were living in a space between labels. She just wasn't ready yet, but she was getting there. Chapter 10. The Rain Falls Again. 7 years after rain brought them together in broken pieces, it fell again as Sean Williams stood on Catherine Jolie's doorstep with the only thing he had left to offer, the truth of who he'd become. Time had moved forward in dramatic and subtle ways. Margaret had become a devoted grandmother, showing up for plays and parties with genuine enthusiasm. She'd learned to braid hair and made both girls special birthday cakes from scratch. She attended every school event, cheering louder than anyone else, making up for years of absence with consistent, joyful presence. Claire had apologized and begun building real relationships with her nieces, taking them to museums and teaching them about art history. The social circles that had once rejected Catherine now included her, though she cared less about their approval than they seemed to expect. Work had flourished. Catherine's community programs had won awards, gained national attention, created real change in neighborhoods across the city. Sean had shifted his company role, delegating more to focus on family, discovering that success measured in his daughter's laughter meant more than any quarterly report. But through all of it, Catherine had maintained one final barrier. She'd let Sean into her life, her daily routines, her daughter's hearts. She'd laughed with him, shared meals, built partnership that worked beautifully. She'd even allowed physical affection, brief touches, hugs, moments hinting at something deeper, but she wouldn't let him all the way in. Wouldn't call what they were becoming by its real name. Wouldn't risk the final leap from co-parents to true partners. Sean had been patient. He'd understood trust built slowly, that Catherine needed to move at her own pace, but he was also human, and he loved her with intensity that grew stronger every day. Watching her with their daughters, seeing her brilliance at work, experiencing her fierce kindness and uncompromising strength, he'd fallen completely, irreversibly in love, and he didn't know how much longer he could not tell her. The opportunity came on an evening mirroring their first night. A storm rolled into the city, bringing heavy rain and lightning splitting the sky. Sean had come for dinner, as had become routine, and the girls had gone to a sleepover at Margaret's, a sign of how much had changed that Catherine trusted this arrangement completely. Sean stood to leave as rain began pounding the windows, but his heart wasn't in the movement. He didn't want to leave. He never wanted to leave anymore. "You should wait out the storm," Catherine said, and there was something in her voice, something softer than usual. "I don't mind getting wet." "Sean." She looked at him, really looked at him in that way that made him feel seen. "Stay." He stayed. They sat on her couch, listening to rain hammer the roof, and the parallel to their first night wasn't lost on either of them. But where that night had been about two broken people seeking temporary shelter, this felt like coming home. "Do you remember that night?" Sean asked quietly. "The first time?" "Pieces, the rain, feeling desperate to escape everything. You crying. Neither of us asking names because names would make it real. I remember more now. Therapy helps." He smiled slightly, self-deprecating. "I remember you held me while I fell apart. I remember feeling safe for the first time since my father died. I remember thinking maybe I'd survive the grief after all. And then you left. And then I left because that's what I did with everything hard. I ran." He turned to face her fully, needing her to see the truth in his eyes. "But I'm not running anymore. You taught me that. You taught me that staying is braver than leaving, that showing up day after day, even when it's hard, even when it's boring, even when there's no reward except the knowledge that you kept your word, that's what love actually looks like. I didn't teach you anything. You taught me everything." His voice was intense, earnest, holding nothing back. "You taught me showing up matters more than success. That consistency matters more than grand gestures. That real love is choosing someone every day, especially when it's hard. That being present means more than being perfect. Sean, I need to say this. Please let me say this." When she nodded, her eyes already glistening with unshed tears, he continued, "I'm not here because of guilt anymore. I'm not here because of the girls, though I love them more than my own life. I'm here because I love you, Catherine. Not the memory of a girl in the rain 7 years ago, but you, the woman sitting next to me right now. The woman who survived what would have destroyed most people and came out stronger. The woman who raised two incredible children alone while the world judged her. The woman who's brilliant and fierce and refuses to accept anything less than she deserves. The woman who saved my mother's life after my mother tried to destroy hers. The woman who taught me what real strength looks like. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Sean's voice was steady now, certain. I love you. I'm in love with you. And I know you're terrified because I left once and you think I'll leave again. But I won't. I can't. You're not something I could walk away from, even if I wanted to. You're everything. Catherine stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Rain streamed down the glass, distorting city lights beyond into watercolor smears. Sean watched her shoulders rise and fall with deep breaths, watched her wrap her arms around herself the way she always did when she was trying to hold herself together. I'm terrified, she said finally, voice barely audible over the rain. I'm so terrified of this. Sean stood, moving closer, but not touching, giving her space to feel without pressure. Why? Because I love you too. The words burst out raw and painful and beautiful. Because somewhere between you showing up for homework and fighting with your family and proving you weren't going anywhere, I fell in love with you. Not because you're the girl's father, not because you've been helpful or consistent or because you've changed, but because of who you are, the man you've become, the way you listen to Bet's endless questions without getting impatient, the way you sit with Audrey when she's quiet because you understand she needs space to process, the way you look at our daughters like they're the most important people in the world, the way you've learned to braid hair and make pancakes shaped like hearts and read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. She turned to face him, tears streaming freely now. And it terrifies me because loving you means trusting you, and trusting you means being vulnerable, and being vulnerable means you could destroy me. And I survived you leaving once. But Sean, I won't survive it again. I won't. Then don't let me leave. Sean closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. I'm not asking you to trust blindly. I'm asking you to let yourself feel what's already there. We love each other. Our daughters love us being together. We've built something real over months of work and showing up and choosing each other. Why can't we acknowledge it? Why can't we make it official? Because acknowledging it makes it real, and real things can hurt you. Real things can be taken away. Real things can also heal you. Sean brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. For 7 years you've been healing yourself. You've been strong and independent and self-sufficient. You've proven you don't need anyone. But Catherine, what if you let yourself want someone anyway? Not because you need them, but because you choose them. Because being with them makes your life better, fuller, happier. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to want something without being terrified of losing it. Neither do I, Sean admitted. I didn't know how to be a father until you taught me. I didn't know how to be present until you made me. I didn't know how to love without performance until you showed me what real love looks like, unglamorous and daily and constant. He squeezed her hands gently. So, we'll figure this out together. Messily, imperfectly, but together. We'll be scared together. We'll take risks together. We'll build something together. Catherine looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. The face she'd memorized over months of close proximity. The face her daughters had come to love. The face of a man who'd proven himself not through words, but through sustained, unglamorous action. I'm still scared, she whispered. Me too. Being this vulnerable is terrifying, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone. I'd rather risk everything for the chance to build something real than protect myself and miss out on this. They stood like that, rain pounding overhead, years of pain and healing and growth pressing between them like something precious. Then Catherine stepped closer, and Sean wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she finally let herself break open the way he'd once broken against her. But this time, the breaking wasn't destructive, it was transformative, it was healing. They didn't make grand declarations that night. They didn't solve everything or erase 7 years of hurt with a few words. They just held each other while the storm raged outside, and it felt like starting over, like healing something that had been broken for so long they'd forgotten what wholeness felt like rain, washing away everything false and leaving only what was real and true and worth fighting for. In the weeks that followed, they took their time. No rushing, no pressure, just gradual integration of their lives in ways that felt natural and inevitable. Family dinners became routine, all 4 of them around Catherine's small table. Weekend outings included everyone, parks and museums and walks through the city. They attended school events together, sat side by side at parent-teacher conferences, stopped pretending they were anything other than a family. Margaret watched this unfold with quiet joy, never interfering, just supporting. She'd truly changed, becoming the grandmother Audrey and Bet deserved, and watching Sean build what she'd never taught him how to build. When Sean finally proposed, it wasn't grand or public. It was on an ordinary Tuesday evening, helping with homework at Catherine's kitchen table. Bet was struggling with fractions, her face scrunched in concentration. Audrey was reading silently beside them, lost in one of her fantasy novels. It was domestic and ordinary and perfect. In the middle of explaining numerators for the 3rd time, Sean just stopped. He looked at Catherine across the table, her reading glasses perched on her nose, pencil tucked behind her ear, completely focused on helping their daughter understand math. And he couldn't not ask any more. "Marry me." Catherine's head came up slowly. "What?" "Marry me." Sean's heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. "Not because it's expected, not because of the girls, though they're the best reason I could imagine. Marry me because we've both become people who deserve the love we're brave enough to build together." "You're proposing during fraction homework?" But she was smiling, and there were tears in her eyes, and Sean saw yes before she said it. "I'm proposing during our real life. This is what it looks like, homework and dinner and bedtime routines, and loving you through all the boring, beautiful, ordinary moments. This is what I'm asking for. Forever of this." Audrey looked up from her book, eyes wide. "Are you asking Mama to marry you?" "Yes." "Then you should have a ring," Bet said practically, already moving on from fractions. "That's how it works in all the movies." "I have a ring." Sean pulled a small box from his pocket. He'd been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment, and somehow this chaotic, ordinary evening was exactly right. The ring was simple and elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band, nothing ostentatious. "But your mum's approval matters more than any ring." Both girls turned to Catherine with hopeful faces, holding their breath. She looked at the 3 of them, her daughters, and the man who'd spent every single day proving he wasn't going anywhere, and felt the last piece of her carefully constructed armor finally, completely fall away. "Yes," she said, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, you ridiculous man! Yes!" The girls screamed with joy. Bet launched herself at Sean, and Audrey wrapped her arms around Catherine, and for a moment they were all just holding each other and laughing and crying and celebrating this thing they'd built together from broken pieces. Sean slipped the ring onto Catherine's finger, and it fit perfectly. She looked at it, catching the light, then up at him and kissed him properly for the first time with their daughters watching. It was sweet and soft and felt like a promise. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too, always." Planning the wedding took time. They decided on Ashford Ridge, not seeking the town's approval but showing their daughters where their story began, where everything started, where both their parents had been broken and eventually became whole. The town had changed, or perhaps Catherine had changed enough that their opinions no longer touched her. She walked through streets she'd once fled, with her head held high, Sean's hand in hers, introducing him to the few people who'd been kind when everyone else had been cruel. The morning of the wedding, Catherine stood in the same resort where she'd worked 7 years ago, now a guest in the bridal suite. Margaret was helping her with her dress, a simple, elegant design that made her feel beautiful. Claire was braiding Bet's hair while Audrey tried on her flower girl dress for the 10th time. "You look stunning," Margaret said softly, adjusting Catherine's veil. "Sean is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Catherine said, and meant it. "He became someone worth loving. You made him become that person. You demanded it. You never accepted less than he was capable of being." Margaret met her eyes in the mirror. "Thank you for that. For saving him. For saving me too." The ceremony happened at sunrise, just as they'd planned. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the mountain air was crisp and clean. Margaret attended with genuine warmth. Claire stood as Sean's best woman, a small gathering of people who actually mattered. Friends from work, the twins' teachers, a few family members who'd proven themselves worthy, rather than hundreds who'd have come out of obligation. Catherine wore her simple dress and carried wildflowers picked from the mountain meadow. Sean wore a suit but shed his jacket before the ceremony even started because formality had never been what they were about. Audrey and Bet stood beside their parents holding hands, part of the ceremony itself. The officiant kept it brief, but the vows were long and personal. Sean promised to show up every day, even when it was hard, to choose her and their daughters over everything else, to never stop earning the trust she'd given him, to love her through boring Tuesdays and exciting adventures and everything in between. Catherine promised to keep letting him in, even when it scared her, to believe in him when his own faith wavered, to build this life together instead of trying to carry everything alone, to love him through his imperfections because he'd loved her through hers. When they kissed, sealing promises spoken and unspoken, the sun crested the mountain and bathed them all in golden light. The reception was casual, a picnic in the meadow where Catherine had once hidden during breaks from work, dreaming of escape. Now she was here by choice, surrounded by people who loved her, building something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Later, as the afternoon stretched long and golden, Catherine stood at the edge of the meadow watching Sean play with the girls, chasing them through wildflowers while they shrieked with laughter. Margaret approached, standing beside her quietly. "He's different from the boy I raised," Margaret said. "Better, whole in ways he never was before." "He did that himself," Catherine said. "I just refused to accept less." "That's what he needed, what we all needed." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Welcome to the family, officially." Years unfolded in moments after that, not in rushed montage, but in the gentle accumulation of days that became weeks, that became seasons. Catherine and Sean bought a house together, not too big, not too small, with a backyard where the girls could play and a porch where they could sit on rainy evenings. They built routines, Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday evening game nights, daily homework sessions that sometimes ended in laughter and sometimes in tears, but always ended together. They learned how to fight fairly, how to forgive quickly, how to choose each other even when it was hard. The girls grew, as children do. Audrey remained quiet and thoughtful, developing a love for writing that Catherine encouraged. Bet stayed bold and curious, asking questions about everything, keeping them all on their toes. They both thrived, knowing they were loved, completely and unconditionally, by both parents. Margaret became the grandmother she'd never known how to be, making up for lost time with enthusiasm and genuine love. She taught the girls to bake and took them to museums and showed up for every single important moment. Work continued to matter, but it wasn't everything anymore. Catherine's programs expanded, touching more lives, but she never missed a school event for a meeting. Sean restructured his role at the company, prioritizing presence over profit, and discovered that success measured in his daughter's laughter was the only kind that actually mattered. And sometimes, often, on rainy nights, Catherine would stand at their living room window, watching storms roll through the city. Sean would come up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Remembering," he'd ask quietly. "Always," she'd say. "The night that started everything. The night that broke us both. The night that eventually made us whole." They'd stand like that, listening to rain, remembering that rain had once destroyed them but had also washed away everything false. It had stripped them both down to raw truth and given them a chance, unlikely and imperfect and hard-won, to build something real. A love built not on a single passionate night in the rain, but on 1,000 ordinary days of showing up, of staying present, of choosing each other when it would have been easier to walk away, of proving that some men, when pushed hard enough by strong enough women, actually learned to become who they should have been all along. And some women, when given reason enough to hope, learned that trust could be rebuilt, that walls could come down, that love earned through action rather than promised through words was the only kind worth having. Rain had brought them together. Time had kept them together. Love, real, unglamorous, daily love, had made them whole.